leadership is an inside out job. And I think that is when it dawned on me that executive coaching was and should always be connected to life and our lives, not just work, that we are one person interacting in these different areas of our lives.
Welcome to the Mentor Files. I'm your host, Monica Royer, founder and CEO of Monica and Andy. Join me as I chat with leaders across the fields of entrepreneurship, parenthood, health, and lifestyle. This season, we're digging deeper than ever before to learn the story behind the story. Think of the show as one part Audible MBA and one part certification to be the confident CEO of your own life. Here we go. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to an important mentor in my life. Irene Ortiz-Glass, the founder and CEO of the Leadership Advisory Group. Not only does Irene coach executives, but she offers incredible support to women throughout their life journey. As my executive coach, I can't even begin to tell you how much I've learned from Irene, and I'm thrilled you get to hear wisdom directly from her today. Let's get started.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Monica. I so appreciate you.
Oh my gosh. Likewise. And for people that haven't, I feel like I've been very privileged in this journey to be able to have had a coach like Irene. And just to give everybody a little bit of like, what does that mean? What Irene has done is, as you encounter different challenges at work and like as you're leading a company, and frankly, as you're working in a company, I think there's so many different people that can benefit from it. Now, one of the number one things you can benefit from is therapy. And I encourage everybody to do that. But as you really think about business, the idea of having an executive coach is all about, one, getting to know yourself better and understanding who you are, and then taking that knowledge on to get to know your team better and make sure that you deeply understand your own strengths and weaknesses so that you could bring your best self to the office every day or to the Zoom room every day. So, Irene, as I welcome you, my first question is, tell us about how you got into life coaching to begin with. I feel like you have so much wisdom. Like, did you start at, was that like teenage Irene, like as good at like,
I wish. I wish. No, it was actually not on purpose. It was, I know it was my destiny. I was meant to be in the role that I'm in now doing what I do, but I had no idea I would end up here. I think it was a series of really amazing mentors and people in my life who taught me what it meant to really get inside someone's head about what they cared about and in their heart. And I started my career at Right Management, laying off people who were in their 50s when I was in my late 20s. And it was probably the most defining experience that led me to this work, because what happened was, there's that movie Up in the Air where this young woman is traveling with George Clooney and she's doing the same thing. And it's literally my life in the beginning. And what I realized is that people were getting laid off in their 50s and they were shocked. They had no idea why they were being let go. And I had this one experience where a gentleman was so incredibly pained by the experience that he hid underneath the desk because he didn't want to deal with HR or with anybody giving him his paperwork. And I remember thinking, wow, people really don't get any feedback or support or coaching or help along the way to not end up here, or if they do, to have a plan. And it was at that moment I realized that there's got to be a better way.
And so from that moment, you're in your 20s, you've got this job, all the way to like, when did the life coaching or like the executive coaching, when did you have an opportunity to actually start doing that, Irene?
So I ended up, after leaving Right Management, being recruited to work for Korn Ferry as a senior partner, building their practice. So they were starting an executive coaching leadership development practice. And it was, they gave us a couple $1 million and said, good luck, hire some people. And when we basically place CEOs, find a way to then develop the people that we place and their teams. And so we were a startup. We bought 5 companies. We integrated them around assessment and coaching. I became certified there. I was at the same time getting my master's degree in organizational leadership. And I was really business development. I was a senior partner selling the services. But then I realized while I was there, I want to do the work. And so I began also delivering services and doing coaching and fell in love with it. I realized that it was game changing for people. And it was interesting. There was a gentleman named Kevin Cashman. We purchased his firm, and he had this motto that leadership is an inside out job. And I think that is when it dawned on me that executive coaching was and should always be connected to life and our lives, not just work, that we are one person interacting in these different areas of our lives. Work is just one part of them. So while I don't describe myself as a life coach, I will tell you that 50% of the work I do when I'm doing executive coaching, as you know, is around life and issues that come up with life, because life and work as leaders, especially as a CEO, are very connected.
Absolutely. And don't let Irene fool you as you hear her talk about this. She has a unique gift. And so as I think about like, oh, could I have been on the trajectory and done that? The answer is no. There is something so special about the way in which like Irene can connect with you. And even just sharing too, Irene, I remember talking to you for the first time. It was during COVID. I was standing in like the garden of my in-laws' house because we went there to stay like a week, and we were there for like 2 months or something like that. And at that time, my brother had said to me, hey, you're getting to the next stage of growth for your company. You need therapy and you need an executive coach. Like those are, you need to really like be able to manage your own psychology in order to make it through like the next few years. And so I remember talking to Irene, and I talked to like a number of other people, and then COVID hit much harder. This was like almost at the very beginning, and everybody else disappeared. And Irene, even though I wasn't working with her, was like calling and offering me resources and suggesting different things that I could do. And I thought, oh my God, this is a human that I'm not even her client, but she like actually, she talked to me and she cares about what's going to happen next. And so through that journey, we started working together. And I think the hardest part of doing it, to your point, Irene, is like there is like a line between who you are personally is a big part of who you show up for, how you show up professionally as well. And so I definitely think we've got to components of the conversation where it's like, oh, this might really be diving into like more deep therapy that's needed for me. Like there is like a fine line that crosses both of those things. And I feel like the reason and what makes Irene so special, and is if you're listening to this and are thinking about executive coaching, is I think it's kind of like being a good leader. You have to care about the human behind the leader as well in order to really understand it. And that is something that I feel like Irene, like you really carry with you and you take to heart.
Well, I believe that leading is a human experience. And I think that I've been alive long enough and seen my own psychology, and I've been through my own therapy to see that, you know, the patterns of our lives started a long time ago. They started as children with our parents and our belief systems, and, you know, basically the decisions that we made and the agreements we make with ourselves at a very young age. And then they sort of morph. And then as you become a leader, they're like on stage, right? Every day of our lives, with every team member, with every investor, with the market, you know, with our board members. And so we need to think through, what am I carrying with me? What is serving me? What serves the company? And where do I need to make adjustments, whether it's through therapy? And there is a very thin line between, you know, therapy and coaching. It's kind of a bit bizarre. Luckily, I know when it's crossing, and I can say to somebody, hey, that's a therapy thing. I can't diagnose or work with you there. And I know when it's a work thing that's around the fringes of therapy that I can help with. So, you know, you really have to know what you're doing. You have to be careful, because there's psychology and then there's, you know, leadership, and they're very, very closely married.
Absolutely. And the thing that I feel like is so special about this new stage of the podcast is we're really thinking about telling kind of the story behind the story. And I think, Irene, one of the things that I was most fascinated about with you is like, as we work together, I remember thinking, this is a woman that has everything together. She's so articulate. She's so good at like seeing kind of into your soul and understand like the thought process kind of behind how you're getting somewhere, and helping you to unpack that so you can break down all of the steps of your own leadership to be like, oh, these first 3 steps are great, but like I kind of stumble on the next 2, and then I get back on my footing, and how can I fix that area where we stumble? And then you shared with me that you've been through hard times, and there's been difficulties in your own life that have brought you to where you are. And I think, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about some of what you've gone through, but I think part of what makes leaders great is the stumbles that they have themselves, or the humanity that they experience in their own lives that you then bring to your work that helps to make better leaders. So if you feel like you're listening to this and you're stumbling in your leadership, or stumbling in your personal life, you can take some of that stumbling and actually build like a deeper foundation from your leadership. And Irene, if you'd be open to sharing some of, especially what you experienced like early on in your career, because then I want to get to sort of the book that you've more recently written that is absolutely incredible, and like some of your later experiences. But tell us a little bit about your early story.
Yeah, so this one is that I'm going to share today. I've not shared with anybody, so I'm going to be pretty vulnerable, and I'm at a place now where I've decided that's really important. So bear with me if I get a little bit emotional. But first of all, I will say that all the leaders that I've ever worked with who are great have had hardship. The difference is between how they handled the hardship. Were they able to do the work, get into therapy, get help, see themselves, see reality, and then move forward? And I'm fortunate that I can sit here and tell you, and I know I've talked to Andy about this too, one-on-one, your brother, that, we can actually both say we're grateful for the hardship because it did help us find purpose. And I know I watch Andy and think, wow, he took it all the way. And so I've tried to do the same. So here's the story. At a very young age, my dad left when I was 5, my birth father, and he did not want to see me. And I remember waiting for him. He'd say he'd come and then he wouldn't. And, I'm a little girl kind of standing at the window thinking, is my daddy ever going to come? And I remember trying to look really pretty, like wanting to wear the nicest dress. And I had bows in my hair. And I was always a little bit chubby as a kid. And I was worried if he'd think I was fat. I mean, even at the age of like 9, I'm thinking these things. And so if you don't think your psyche is, impacted by that, right? That's a big, big deal. And he never came. Like he basically just never wanted to show up. And so that was really, really rough. By the age of 13, though, I was experiencing sexual psychological abuse by my stepfather. And what does that mean? It means that he never put his hands on me, but it was probably the things I saw and experienced with him were probably, very near as bad as that could have been. And by the age of 17, I finally told my mother what was going on after years of this abuse. And she basically, was not able to handle it, wasn't able to do anything about it, wasn't able to respond appropriately as a mother. So now here I am, I'm 17 years old. And if you really think about it, I've experienced being abandoned by all 3 of the people who were supposed to really love me, the people who were supposed to be the people I could count on. And the reason the story matters is this. I put on a lot of, armor from those experiences. And I remember, and in therapy, in fact, just this last week, I had a really good appointment with my therapist because I still go once a month because I just need to. It's so healthy and good for me. And I said to him, I finally can see all of it like a movie and I can make sense of it. And I'm so grateful for that. But the reality is when those things happened to me, the thing that came like an alarm bell in my body and mind was run as fast as you can, as hard as you can, and don't stop. Keep running. And I ran for a really long time. And what did that look like? And this is where a lot of people can resonate and identify. It looked like perfectionism. It looked like overwork. It looked like never being satisfied. It looked like being very hard on myself, incredibly hard on my son, which it just kills me, the relationship that was hurt by something that hurt me, because hurt people hurt people. That's just how this works. And so I went into overdrive, and then I sort of fell apart. And the falling apart was sort of then when perimenopause hit. And that's when, I wrote the book and I had that journey. But all of that culminated into a beautiful mosaic of my life and has allowed me to help so many people.
Oh my gosh. Irene, first of all, I know I want to honor you sharing this story because I think that I know how hard it is. Recently, I interviewed my mom for the podcast and we couldn't even get through.
Wow.
We barely were able to do like 10 minutes, and she was talking about her childhood and like her. So it's so hard to relive like past traumas on things, and it's hard to bring that to today. But I want you to know, like, people hearing that story and understanding that here is, and I think that's what's so incredible, even as people have looked at my brother, as you've referenced, who has like endured like a very significant psychiatric issues over time, you realize that sometimes from the depth of like your deepest pain, like other people are experiencing the same thing. And if you're brave enough to tell your story, it helps so many other people. And so I think that as hard as it is, as you look back, and obviously wouldn't want anybody to go through the experiences you have, like what you bring. And I think that's what makes you so special as an executive coach, is you see people for the human beings that they are, as opposed to just like the management team members they might be, or like the one-dimensional people that you are as you're doing your job. As you work with clients, Irene, as you think about like connecting with people, and I'm excited also to get to like your later story and like what you're doing today, which is so exciting. Do you find that as you're interviewing people to work with, and I don't want to say like everybody you're working with like is a home run and you can help, but how do you even vet the people as you're getting ready now at the stage you are of executive coaching? Because I feel like you and I are so we have so many commonalities in the way that we do stuff, and it's funny in talking to as sometimes as I talk to other people to say, oh my gosh, like people dive in and you learn more about yourself, and a lot of times people will be like, actually I don't want to learn more about myself, but sometimes people come to you like through their employers or other things, and like how do you know if somebody's going to be the right fit to work with you?
Well, I'm grateful after doing this for like 18 or 20 years that I can tell very quickly if someone is going to be a good candidate for coaching, because I don't want to waste their time and their money or my time. I think it's super important to be clear up front if this is a good match. So one is chemistry. Like, do we vibe with each other? Do we feel like we're a good fit? That's like very, very important. As you know, like there's lots and lots and lots of coaches, but chemistry matters. So I'm always looking for chemistry. And then there's 3 pillars. And the first one that I look for is this person willing to become and get a deeper level of self-awareness? So to your point, when people say, I don't know that I want to know that about myself, that's a sign that, hey, they're probably not a good candidate, because I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go there all the way, not just on the psychometrics of leadership, but assessing behaviors, mindsets, values, and how they approach the world and their history. So that's pillar number 1. Like, are you willing to get to know yourself and why you are who you are? And then the second one is the motivation. Like, are they motivated to then take action, right? Do they have the drive? So being self-aware is one thing. Being motivated is another. And then the third one is, will they do the work? As you know, this is time consuming. It takes, I spend a couple of hours a month, if not more, with people diving into dynamics of the business, issues with the board, fundraising, investor situations, employee situations, and sometimes personal situations where something has happened in their family and they're just having a really hard time showing up at work as a leader, and they need to calibrate. I have a woman now who is experiencing her first time role as a president of a company. And she wrote me and said, I am struggling with my emotional response to how hard this changes. Mm-hmm. And I wrote her and I said, the first thing I'm going to tell you is this is so normal. Like, if you didn't care, you wouldn't feel a thing. It is so good that you're feeling, and it's so normal, but let's talk about how you're coping with it. Right. And that's reality. That's reality.
It is. And it's so interesting. And I'm just like kind of smiling as we're talking, because I'm thinking about all the things I've learned from you as we're going through this conversation. And I think some of it is like so basic, and then it becomes more complicated. But this idea that you learn, for me, and I think one of the biggest learnings as we did the assessment was, Monica, you're very flexible. And I don't mean physically, by the way. I'm like I'm like the most inflexible person in a yoga class, but from a personality standpoint. And, the way that you delivered it too, which is like, this can be a great quality, but on the other hand, like, keep an eye on like how flexible you are and stuff. And it's funny because, as you know, Bella, my daughter, in the backdrop of listening to stuff, and I know I've told you the story, but want to share it here too, is like, she's very structured. Like, for me, I get a Google Doc with like she's got what her studying and like what she's doing. And she literally like firmly checks the boxes. I've learned so much about parenthood through what we've done with you, because I've identified that like I'm extremely flexible. My husband and daughter are very structured, and it's kind of like helped us to not butt heads as much, because once you understand who you are, and you can kind of assess the people around you. But the funny part is like Bella's like flipped it back on me, as I've shared, where like suddenly plans are changing and things are happening. And she's like, Mom, your flexibility is like now becoming a problem for us. She's like, as you know, I'm much more structured than you, and I'm going to need a little bit of a preview on what's happening next, because this idea that we're just going with the flow is not working for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like a 12-year-old. She understands these concepts. And so the cool thing is, it's not like the conceptual idea of like coaching and what you're doing, it's not so complicated. It's rooted in some of the most basic things about us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like going to marriage counseling where suddenly where you understand yourself a little better and you start to understand the person a little better, it builds more empathy for what's happening because you realize like, oh, this person is actually wired different. And I think that's been the number one thing that's helped from a team perspective is you start to understand
Yeah.
like, or to your point, another great thing that we learned from Irene is like you understand what you're missing. You want a cerebral diversity on the team as well. And one of the things you help to identify is like, whoa, Monica, there is no structure on this leadership. We were diverging in a million different directions. And she's like, you're going to need to hire a few people that can kind of converge this together. So I think there's so much about decision making that you can change once you understand more about yourself and others.
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of what we assess when we go through the process is how somebody's brain is wired and their natural energy, where they go naturally. And teams all have a natural way they work just on the day to day without thinking. So coaching is about assessing what does that look like and how we run this business, what the business needs and how we're wired. And then where do we need to lean in or turn up the energy? As an example for you, you are probably one of the most empathic leaders I know. You care more than most people I see on a daily basis about your business and the health of the business and your employees. And there's a place where that is so powerful. And then there's times when you have to turn the volume down. So I tell people, I do not want you to be inauthentic. I don't want you to be a different version of yourself. I want you to be a version of yourself that knows how to move in and out of the energy that's necessary for a particular audience or a particular problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that can look different hour by hour. You know, that can be a little bit rough on people. And honestly speaking, it's more hard for highly structured people than it is for flexible people because we can kind of roll a little bit better. So there is a difference.
Yes. Well, it's funny if I even I mean, I think some of this stuff could work really well premaritally too. Like, and I've been fortunate to be married for 17 years, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, I literally married the exact opposite. Like everything about Rob is like completely, and maybe that's why it works. It works.
That's why
sometimes.
it works. I assessed my husband early on. Yeah, we're total opposites. Yeah. And it has worked because I can know when he's veering into highly operational structure mode. And I'm like, that's a lot for me. Can we just veer to the right for just a minute? And we do. We talk like that to each other.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I just like it opens up a whole new world as you start to think about that. And the thing that I love about the coaching is like there's no wrong way to be. It's just understanding who you are. And like there's nothing like if you're out there and you're listening and you're afraid of the coaching, I feel like there's nothing negative, whether you're super structured or super flexible. It's just recognizing and understanding like your strengths and weaknesses around it. And then the people that you want to bring around you. I think one thing I want to make sure that we touch on, Irene, is like you and I talk a lot about higher purpose in our conversations. And so I think as I'm somebody that like is living my dream every day, there's a lot of hard days, but you love the job. And I think that every day as I come to it, I realize like this is a privilege. Like no matter what the complexities of it are, it is a privilege to have the complexities that we do face on a daily basis. But I think one of the things I've learned from you is like, no matter what your day-to-day job is, no matter what purpose it's fulfilling, as you're transitioning through decades of your life, like really thinking about like, what do you feel like are you there, Irene? Hold on, the video went off for a second.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I don't know what happened. The video went we're okay though. Let's see if it comes back on, but I can hear you great. Like what is kind of like the higher purpose and like the things that you want to think about from like what will as you're thinking about life and maybe you're 90 years old or 100 years old and you're looking back, like did you fulfill that higher purpose? And I think that's one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about recently, which is like what are the higher purposes? And I think you have more recently dived deeper into your higher purpose and would love for you to share a little bit more about that with everybody too.
I think this is probably my favorite question because I think this is key to the second half of life. So most leaders I work with are in their 40s and they're converging to the second half of life. And there's a lot of great, books out there, but Arthur Brooks, he has a book and I'm blanking on the title right now, but basically the book, the idea is that as you move into your 50s and on, you're really supposed to get more clarity. And the more clear you become on your purpose, your bigger purpose in life, the happier you are, right? So he does an article in The Atlantic on happiness. And the idea is that if you're clear on purpose and significance, you will be happier than if you just cared about making a lot of money or growing a huge business. And what has happened for me is that has crystallized so much that it's almost all that I really focus on now. It's every single day, how is what I'm doing contributing to that purpose? And if it's not, should I really be doing it? Or should I be saying no to that because it doesn't enact purpose? So for me, purpose has become helping other people to grow and learn about themselves, to become that best version of whoever they're supposed to be with their gifts and skills. That is the executive coaching component. On the other side of my world, having gone through menopause in an extreme way, and writing about it in the book I wrote recently, which is The Body Whispers Before It Screams, is my journey of going through perimenopause, menopause, and surgical menopause. That is when it really hit me. Like, I am not well. I am not clear. And when you go through menopause and perimenopause, what no one tells you is that sometimes all of the junk from the past, it starts to resurface like really quickly. It's like your body's weak, your cortisol's low, you're really tired, and everything just piles in. And I had to decide if I was going to stop and reflect and get deep on that, or if I was just going to power through like I like to do with most things. And I didn't. I stopped and I reflected and I healed. And a lot of that healing was physical and hormonal and taking supplements and hormone therapy. But a very, very big part of it was reconciling my past, my trauma, the impact it had on my family, and healing from that, not just for myself, but for my children, for my husband, for all of us. And so my purpose now is twofold. It's working with leaders, and I work with executive women on both sides of these issues. And I have another practice where I have some coaches and a doctor referral network that work with women who come to us with hormone issues and just want to get well. And in both of these worlds, it's basically, I just want to help people become the very best healed version of themselves. And I don't care who you are, we all need healing. We all need healing from something. And if you think you don't, then that means you need more help than another person, because we all need healing.
Absolutely. And thinking about your story, Irene, I feel like you're sitting in like the perfect place and time to start to tell this, because I think even as I'm thinking about brands that come out and conversations that are happening, 2024, which I guess is now, I got to get used to saying it, there's so much technology and like thought process around hormones in a way that like women have never had access to before. And it seems like that's only going to get better and better. As I think about like the early days of fertility, new, people that are planning parenthood, there's so many different ways now and technologies that are available to be like evaluating egg quality and thinking about freezing your eggs, or like all of these other options, whether you want to, whether they're right for you or not, are coming onto the horizon. And as we're thinking about wellness for women, all these conversations at all stages of life and fertility around like hormone balance and what does that look like and how does that affect mental health? And to your point, I think menopause, it seems like, has been a more taboo subject. While there's so many million women that are going through that every single year, it's kind of like the issues with fertility and miscarriage. That people go through them, but they go through them alone. And I think you and a few other folks are on the frontier of like cracking wide open this whole conversation that it seems like people have just been afraid to have until now, or to be able to share. And so what I love about what's happening is that there's this idea that like our mental health, our physical well-being, like all of it is like coming together in a place where it's going to be okay to share all of it. And I, see it from my brother's like admission of like the bipolar diagnosis that he had, and things that like what he says, like, shame is sort of what you're afraid to speak of. And I think it's unbelievable that these like medical conditions that we as women go through are things that we've also been ashamed to speak of. And I think you being on the frontier of that is going to open up the conversation for so many people. Cause I feel like, I don't know if you're open to sharing a little bit more about like how you actually medically went through this. There's a difference between, as I've learned from you, between like going through menopause and like being forced immediately into menopause as well.
Yeah, there's a huge, huge difference. So, I had ovarian cysts for years, and they continued to they removed the cysts surgically a couple of times. I had horrible PMS, terrible PMDD, emotional, moody, all of that. What I didn't know that I know now is that that's a precursor telling you that you're probably not going to have a great menopausal experience. So if you have had PMS, if your periods were terrible, if you were moody and emotional and anxious and depressed, you're likely going to have that on the other side of things. And I didn't know that. So after removing cysts, the surgeon finally said, I can't keep cutting these out. We're gonna do surgical removal of both ovaries, a bilateral oophorectomy. And I really didn't know what that was except for a mouthful of words. And then, I talked to my doctor, and she said, Irene, this is looking like you're just making too much estrogen. We need to be done with this. So they took both ovaries out. And if I thought that I had problems before that, like hormonally being sensitive, emotional, and feeling off, I dove into massive depression, massive anxiety, was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, was given several medications, and nothing was working. I was feeling worse, not better. And so I decided after surgery, after none of this was working, that I couldn't handle it anymore. And I just decided that I had to advocate for myself. So I went back to school for 8 months. I became a hormone practitioner. All the while, I'm executive coaching women all day, or men and women all day long. And now I'm in school and I'm thinking I'm crazy, but I got to figure this out because that's me. I'm gritty. I'm super, super gritty. And so I throw all the labs down on the floor. There's thousands of years of labs. And, I start doing genetic testing and I get underneath it. And I basically start to piecemeal my way back to healing. And I did. I did that. I advocated. I went to my hormone doctor. I said, I've done the labs. I've looked at all the education. I've seen it. Here's what I think's going on. And it was funny. She looked at me and she goes, yeah, I pretty much agree with this. So let's give it a try. So we started hormone therapy in a certain way. I started supplementing. I had a gene mutation that I found on my own. Nobody else did. I asked for gene testing. It's called MTHFR. A lot of people talk about it, but it means I cannot break down neurochemicals. Once I solved for that in the hormones, I didn't take another medication. I was fine. I had been on Lexapro years ago because of the PMDD, and that saved me at the time, but I couldn't tolerate it now. And I really knew the issues were hormonal. I just didn't know how to fix them. And so surgical menopause is a very dire, dramatic experience to the body and mind. And it goes back to this adrenal system, cortisol regulation, and, all the things that we do to push through life. And, the message I just really want to get out there to women who are executives is this. Everything that got you here was pushing really hard. It was driving really hard. It was making it happen every day. It is not the thing that will get you through. At the second half, it is not the thing. In fact, the pushing will do the opposite, and you will become less effective and sicker if you don't deal with what's underpinning that need to keep pushing, which is an adrenaline rush. It's like an addiction to adrenaline that drives our focus and behavior. And I had it for years. And I'm still very focused and driven, but I listen and I know when I need to move in and out of the energy and when I need to take a break, because the second half is different and you do change, and no one wants to hear that. We want to slap another, aesthetic solve onto the body to pretend we're not, because society makes it look like we have to, and we don't have to. We need to focus more inward about the inner healing and the wholeness and the wellness of a woman and the psyche, the mental health, to really have a good second half. And I finally feel like I'm there, but it took me 53 years. I don't want it to take that long for women. It shouldn't have to.
Oh my gosh. I mean, for what you've been through. And I think this is going to be so helpful for so many people, because I think I've talked to so many women along the way too, that like with complications of having kids, like very early on, end up in this surgical menopause situation. And I think you're opening up a conversation. If you knew then what you know now, like, would you have not had the surgery? Would you have just gone into it with all of these other hormonal treatments? Like, for people that are like that are going to face this, and they may face this like really early on too, what would your advice be?
So I get asked that question a lot, and I'm not sure what the answer is, if I would have or wouldn't have. And I've realized that's probably not a good use of my energy, because God purposely brought me to that point to help all these women. I mean, the other night I was on the phone with a husband and a wife together about her situation. I mean, it just brought me to tears. So God had a plan, and that trumps all of it. But here's what I will say. Women are uneducated. They are educated by what they see on TV. Just get a patch, take some hormones. I wish it was that simple. It is not that simple. And it is more complex for women who are executives and drivers, because the body actually needs healthy adrenals to support the transition. It needs healthy stress response. It doesn't have that when you're an executive who's driven their career for 40 years. So when menopause hits, you're ill equipped and you're usually not sleeping enough, drinking enough water, eating well, exercising correctly. And what I mean by that is not doing cardio for 50 minutes on a bike or running every day. That is not what the body needs. So what I wish for women, what I wished for myself, is I would have had all the knowledge that I had after surgery to maybe have a smoother landing. You can have a smoother landing. You know, at perimenopause, estrogen goes up and down dramatically. Some women have 2 periods a month. There's a way around that. You know, you can add in progesterone during perimenopause to even out those cycles, sometimes even some estrogen. It depends on the woman. And so there are ways to ease into and then it's adrenal health, it's stress management, the mind stuff, the belief systems, the trauma. If women could just realize it's not a quick fix and really get into doing the work, they would not feel as symptomatic as they do.
Such an incredible story. Irene, tell us the title of the book and where people can get it, because as people are hearing this, I want to make sure that they know where they can go to really understand like the full story.
Yeah, so The Body Whispers Before It Screams is on Amazon, and it is the full story, soup to nuts, everything and more than you probably ever wanted to know about me. And then I also have a podcast series. But the beauty of the book, I think, is it's a story of not just hormones and menopause. It's a story of my life a little bit. It's about how one thing leads to another, and impacts the body, that impacts the transition. So my hope is that people can have an opportunity to read that and probably identify with some of those things that, you know, they're going through, or they have friends that are, you know, some people sail through menopause. They don't have a problem. I can't stand those people. Some of them do, and it's great. But, you know, many don't. I mean, like 1 billion a year don't. And we've got to find better ways to educate, inform, and support women. No matter what, we have to find a better way.
Absolutely. And just hearing you say that, like, that's so universal to everything about fertility, right? Like there's people where they have kids and it's no problem. And then you're somebody that's like deeply struggling to have children. And it's really hard to see all of the people that are so easily able to do it. So I think that the idea of hormones and like our fertility as women from like the beginning sort of to like to menopause and beyond, like there's so much consideration to have. And to your point, like some people have no problems and other people don't. And as I think more universally, Irene, about the lessons I've learned from you, I think that's another, like what you're talking about is sort of a microcosm too of like, as you look on social media, as you're like a woman that's like building career and like having family and doing all the things. I think that one of the things that I've learned from you is like, you can have it all, but it doesn't have to be all at once. And so I think that if you're out there and you're listening today and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm hearing from this incredible executive, Irene, and you know, she's done all of these different things. I think the one thing you've taught me that's been the most important lesson for me is like, one, it's definitely need to focus on yourself and like, what are the things that like refuel you and make you feel better? And that's kind of like understanding your psychology too. Some people are fueled by being really social. Other people are fueled by being like, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're being truest to yourself. And then it's okay if you can't do all of it at once. And I remember in one of our earliest conversations, Irene, I said, about this, my family's incredible, this incredible job. Like, really don't, I've got a big family. I don't have as much time for friends. And you said, hey, that's okay. There'll come a stage and a time in which you'll be able to focus on those things. And that's not necessarily a popular thing to say. Plus, that's a very personal decision in the sense that for other people, like it may be work and friends or whatever it is, but like it's okay as you're looking at what appears on social media to people doing it all and having it all. I think Irene and I are here to tell you, you don't have to. You don't have to be able to do all of it once. And it's like really hard. I certainly can't, but I feel like you gave me permission. And I think about that a lot where I'm like, you know what? As long as you're confident in what you pick and choose to spend your time on, and that is not the same for everybody, then at least you can say like, hey, I've chosen right now that I can't do this and I'll come back to this later.
Yeah, I think it's about honoring the journey. So, every part of your journey is a little different. Like in one part, you're raising small children and you're barely, feeding yourself because you're trying to do for all of everybody. And then in another part, they're going to school and they have more independence. And now maybe you can do a little more because you do have a little more free time. And where do you want to put that energy? And then it changes again. And then it changes again. And then you change incredibly in your mid 40s to 50s. So, your body, your experiences, and your lives are constantly changing. So I think it's about intentionality. Like as much as I've been through and all the introspection, I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm like, is it ever over? I say to myself in the morning, I pray. That's my thing. And I'm like, okay, God, where do you want me to put it today? I look at the calendar, I look at my day, and like, where do I need to be in my head with these people? I mean, I talk to 8 to 10 people a day. I coach them all day.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not straight on me, I can't really pour into anybody. So I work really hard to make sure I'm centered so that then I can help other people find their way. And so I think intentionality and having grace with yourself. We just don't do that. We don't have enough grace with ourselves.
Irene, from the bottom of my heart, like you have literally changed the trajectory of my life, and I've learned so much from you. So I'm so grateful to be able to actually have the privilege of working with you directly myself. And thank you so much for doing the podcast today, because I feel like the whole idea is like, how do we pay it forward and take this great advice that we're getting and share it, more widely. So if you haven't checked out Irene's book, we'll put all of the stuff up online and make sure that everybody has access. And hopefully, Irene, this is only the beginning of our conversations on the podcast, because I think there's so much more I can learn from you and so much more that I'd love to be able to share with everybody. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Such an honor. I appreciate it so much.
Isn't Irene amazing? I'm so glad you got to hear from her today, and I hope you were as inspired as I am. As always, I appreciated Irene's honesty, perspective, and encouragement to find the positives in every hard lesson. Whether you're an entrepreneur or person navigating a life transition, there is so much value in keeping your mindset focused on your purpose. Irene's new book about facing menopause is called The Body Whispers Before It Screams and is now available on Amazon. Visit Monica and Andy's website for links to learn more about Irene's executive leadership work, Menno coaching, and her new book. Please also consider subscribing to the Mentor Files and leaving a review. I'm your host, Monica Royer. See you next time.